Hey guys, Henning and MJ from FlippedNormals.com, and in today's episode, we are talking about the very turbulent state of the industry. The creative industry currently is suffering from mass layoffs in both VFX and games, and basically everything else. It's hard for people who are currently employed who are fearing layoffs, and it's absolutely hard for people who are facing layoffs and can't find jobs. So we're just going to be discussing a lot of different things that's happening, what's currently happening, and also why on earth has this been happening? Why are there suddenly so many layoffs? And then we're going to be talking about what can you do about that to the degree that you actually can control this. So hopefully there's going to be some good tips there at the end as well.
Yeah, it's gonna be probably a more lengthy one, and we'll be touching on a lot of subjects, both within games and VFX, but also briefly having a chat about the state of the world over the past couple of years, the economy, a bunch of fun and less fun subjects, but hopefully we'll be able to tie everything together a little bit better to give you a better overview, a more informed overview of why all these things might be happening.
So speaking of what's happening, currently we have, at the time of recording, we're at around 6,500 layoffs in the games industry, and an untold amount in VFX as well. It's hard to see how many are have been laid off in VFX, but it's a
Mm.
significant amount. In slightly better news, I suppose, and actually very good news, we the actors' strike just concluded some hours ago. As of
Yeah.
this recording, this is 9th of November, so they just finished like just over midnight in the U.S. time. So that's awesome. That means that the writer strike is over, the actor strike is over. I suppose they just have to ratify some contracts and such, but they have come to an agreement. So at least in film, hopefully they can start to shoot things there. Obviously, it doesn't fix the broader economic issue, but at least that's one hell of a roadblock gone already.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at just the impact on the economy in general, you've gone from I wouldn't call it, I'm not going to call it overproducing shows, but platforms were, they were putting out content like crazy to where we are now, where I think the strike was something like 118 days, almost 120 days for the actors. And that's at times combine that with the writer strike, just time where content wasn't being produced, and that's going to have a noticeable effect also in the economy because entertainment makes up such a large chunk of the overall world economy.
Yeah, it's just ruthless as well, and obviously locally within the economy as well. If you just our perspective is VFX, we're going to be talking a lot about gaming as well here. But if a VFX production shoots or stops, then you have issues with the commercials, which are going to be promoting that. Like here in London, you
Yeah.
have prints on all the big buses for all the big movies coming out. That stuff stops entirely, and then the people who put up the prints on the buses stops. Right, like everything just kind of stops because the main shooting stops because of that. So everything is connected, and that's something we are going to get into in this video. We're going to be talking about like some actual economy, like some actual like macroeconomic trends. We're going to try to keep it simple, and also just a disclaimer as well before we really get into that. This stuff is difficult. Like this stuff is just hard to figure out. We're going to be talking a bit about inflation and economic cycles, a little bit of that, and this is the kind of stuff that even like veteran economists can't really agree upon. And we are CG artists. We do have a bit of a unique perspective on this in the sense that we're also business owners, so we're trying to understand this kind of stuff because this relates very much to what we're doing like day to day with FlippedNormals. So that's just a little disclaimer. Stuff is hard. If you get something wrong, just let us know in the comments, and we'll try to
We
rectify
are
that.
not economists. I think that's
No.
the big takeaway here. Spoilers, but so it's to the best of our abilities. But it's also it's with us running Flip Normals, I think Henning and I sort of almost independently have developed an interest for for figuring out how the economy works. Also, often on a deeper level, like not just the surface level. So hopefully, we'll be able to bring something to the table that might make things make more sense for you.
So I just want to start off with a little bit of history, what's been happening over the last like 10, 14 years or so. Just this is going to help to understand more of what's happening instead of it just going like, oh, bad management and greedy corporations. There is something more to it than that. Not saying corporations are greedy. They are, but just a bit of a perspective. So in 2008, the world economy basically blows up. It's practically Armageddon in terms of the financial markets. The stock market crashes, housing crashes, mass layoffs. And in order to fix that, the governments around the world, they are setting interest rates down to practically zero. They're the lowest they've been in. I saw a chart of it. It's probably something like 5,000 years. Like basically, this is unheard of. You never have interest rates at around like 1% to 2%. And we had this for around like 14 years now, between basically 2008 and 2022, when they're starting to increase the rates. What this means, this sounds like it's just boring economy stuff, but what this means from a very practical point of view is that money got really, really cheap. If you needed a mortgage got cheaper than ever, which is exactly the point. That's why they lowered the interest rates, so that people could afford more. If you want a business loan, suddenly that's a lot cheaper as well. As a result, the stock market goes crazy. It increases like nothing else over the last many years. Housing market goes up, and in general, there's just a lot of money in the economy. A lot of money in the economy means consumer spending is really high. People are spending a lot of money on movies, games, just anything really. But also, when they have a lot of money, it's not just consumers; it's also investors. So banks are having a lot of money. VC investors like venture capital has a lot of money. So if you were in like 2017, 2018, and you were trying to find investment for your business, that was not particularly hard compared to, it's always hard to find investment, but not historically hard. Historically, that was a lot easier than it's really been. So this means that there was just a crap ton of money in the economy because of very low interest rates. For instance, Netflix, the rise of Netflix is in a very large way down to very cheap loans. They had something like $14 billion of loans. They had in the peak, I think they had $4 to $5 billion of loans per year. And currently, they're spending almost $1 billion just managing that debt. That's just in pure interest payments. So stuff went completely crazy. And COVID happens as well, which also fueled the economy even further in terms of online spending. The economy isn't just up and down. There are like sectors of it. Some goes up, some goes down. If you're running a restaurant in 2020, you make no money whatsoever. But if you're running an online store, which FlippedNormals was doing, or PlayStation or Xbox or Nintendo, or any one of the main publishers, their main producers of games, I suppose, they're just making a lot of money because people are generally spending the same amount, but they can't spend it in real world, like in physical stores. So they're spending this online. So there was a huge surge of money in all these companies, and they're making decisions kind of based on the party continuing forever. If companies aren't necessarily smart in terms of that, they can be very short-sighted. So a lot of companies, they hired like the COVID boom. Sounds weird even saying the COVID boom because that was a devastating event on the economy in general. But in terms of just online stuff, it was great. And they hired like this would just keep going forever. And obviously can't. The COVID subsided. People could actually spend money in restaurants again. People could see their friends again. And assuming they're spending the same amount of money, that means they're now spending less online. So everything goes down again now. And people are being forced back into office, in large part also due to, again, the economy. It's also like commercial real estate is down. Banks own a lot of commercial real estate. They really want people to come back into office, which also forces people to spend less money. But on top of all this, kind of weird, like this whole thing goes a little crazy, is inflation happens. We're not going to go into why that happens, but it does. And unless inflation is properly treated, we are having a really, really, really big issue. Like Turkey for instance, has insane inflation, and it just cripples the economy. Money becomes worthless. And the central government doesn't really have, or the central banks, they don't really have a lot of tools for dealing with this. And the government in general, they don't really have that many levers. And one of the levers they do, one of the buttons they can press really hard is interest rates, because the central banks are controlling the interest rates. And they're raising them at a historic pace. They're going from like 1% to 2% to, now in the UK, it's 5.25%. It's crazy. That again has a very real world impact. It's not just, numbers goes up, numbers goes down. It means if you have a mortgage, your mortgage becomes significantly more expensive. If you're renting, the landlord's mortgage, it becomes more expensive. Everything becomes more expensive. If you have a company car, that car is now more expensive. So suddenly people just have a lot less money. The companies have less money, consumers have less money, and that's obviously the point, right? If there is inflation, that means there is too much money in circulation, and the way you combat that in one way is to reduce the money supply. It's a crude way of doing it. It's not an elegant solution. It's just press the button to increase the rates, and now people have just less money. They can spend less money, and it's a cycle, right? Like the economy goes in cycles. It goes really up and down, where you're going between like prosperity and recession. And we've basically been at the end of a 14-year market where everything has been going really well. And now the party seems to be over, and people are anticipating a recession, cutting their losses because of that, or they are already feeling it in a very real way, where sales are down, and they're cutting staff because of that. This is probably going to recover because, again, it's a cycle. It might take some time. Nobody knows when stuff recovers. If anyone tells you they know when stuff recovers, they are lying, because we cannot predict the future. Most likely will recover. Who knows? But that's at least what we're hoping will happen. And
yeah.
That's a brief history of what's been going on. That's kind of a foundation for everything. So before we just start to talk about managerial issues and all that kind of stuff, which there are plenty of greed going on. We just have to have a base of understanding that 2008 happened. There was crazy recession, world economy blows up, interest rate goes to practically zero. Money is super cheap. People are fueling the economy. Then inflation happens, interest rates goes up like crazy. There is no more free money. There is no more cheap money. You can't have investment rise up, loans goes up. And that's kind of the backbone for what's going on here.
I think to give a little more context, to not to get too heavily into inflation, when you think about back in 2008 and following what happened after that, like Henning said, money became cheap, right? So the obvious thing to do for a lot of companies and also for people buying houses is to borrow money. Now you're in debt, and without getting too deep into it, debt creates money. So the more loans, the more debt, the more money there is in the world. That in turn drives inflation and the need to increase inflation to bring that spending down, to bring lending down again, to sort of stabilize everything. And because we've had that historic low that's been going on for a while, it's almost like you need a counter reaction on the other end that's as extreme in terms of the high as the lows have been. And that might be a large part of what's fueling this now.
Yeah, I think this is in large part what's been happening in the economy. If you were to take away corporate greed, assuming they're all like absolute angels who cared the most about their employees, their real families, and assuming that COVID hadn't happened and such, like you still at a level where something similar is going to happen at a different time scale, simply because it goes up and down. You have a lot of money in the economy, and at some point there is just too much, and inflation happens, and a recession happens. So at some point this here was going to happen no matter what. But that said, the greed and bad management is definitely a part of this as well. But if you're looking at VFX, for instance, that's a difficult one, because in VFX, shooting stopped. Like if everything was perfect, if the economy was in the best spot ever, and again, the bosses were absolute angels and everything was fine. If shooting stops in VFX, you don't have plates, you have nothing to work from. VFX companies, they don't work with animation, they, like in terms of like Pixar animation, right? They need stuff to work from. So in terms of that, there is definitely like macroeconomic factors impacting it, but this was going to happen if there was a strike, and this is just decimating VFX at the moment.
I think that's also one of the factors that makes it tricky. Like we've talked about corporate greed a lot, especially leading up to this episode. But when you look at it from a pure business perspective, I think it's tricky when you're anticipating you have that wave of a lot of work and then it goes down. When you're in that slump, or you're projecting that you'll be in that slump as a company, you kind of have to be proactive, so you don't end up with 500 people on staff that aren't doing any work and are just, unfortunately, an expense for the company because there's no more work coming in. Maybe it's their fault they didn't bid properly, or in this case, all of work stops in Hollywood, so there just isn't projects, or there aren't any projects coming in for anyone. At that point, it's logical for companies to start laying people off or not extending contracts. I think where it gets trickier for people to understand, and I think that's what we're seeing in games a lot, is companies reporting record highs in terms of earnings, and seemingly the next month, they lay off 1,000 people. And I think that's the tricky part to understand, and that's the one part that I think comes off as, oh, that's corporate greed. They just want more money, so now they're laying people off. But we'll try to see if we can't dive a little deeper into that without. I mean, it's tricky because I don't want to be like, oh, I'm on the side of the artist, and here's a bunch of arguments for the companies on why they're doing this. But it's just to try and give a little more context, I think.
Yeah, we were really trying to figure out how we would structure this episode, because this is a very sensitive topic, because at this point there is a lot of pain in the industry. There is like very, very real tangible pain. People have moved country, moved continent, and then suddenly they, like 2 months after they did that, they did get escorted out of their offices by security, and they can't say goodbye to their friends, and they're just sitting in an apartment being like, what the hell do I do now, and what the hell have I got myself into? It's a very, very tricky situation. On one hand, you have so much pain and suffering now in the industry. On the other hand, you also have companies who are making less money as well. Like in again, VFX production stopped. They don't have crazy cash reserves. And it gets tricky with companies making record profits as well, right? One thing which I think is just a very common misunderstanding here, a bit of a tangent, but I often see this where you have like the valuation of a company. Let's say you have like Epic or something like that. Like let's say, there, for sake of argument, the valuation is like $40 billion. That does not mean they have $40 billion in cash. It's the same thing you're seeing with like Elon Musk's net worth or Zuckerberg's net worth decreased by $20 billion per day, or Elon Musk lost $20 billion. He didn't lose $20 billion because it's not like somebody adds or removes cash from his massive vault. What's happening is that they have stock in a company, and the stock goes up and down. And when you have that much stock, if you have like $100 billion worth of stock, if it goes up by like 5%, you've gained or lost $5 billion, right? It's a whole different thing than just you have cash. So that's just an important thing to keep in mind. Then if you're seeing that a company has a valuation that's really high, it does not necessarily mean that they're cash rich. They can also have a crazy burn rate where they have so many artists. They might have like 5,000 people working for them, and that is just incredibly expensive in terms of pure cash burn rate. So I just wanted to clear that up here, that valuation does not mean cash in the bank account.
No, and we see this, I think, on especially with the tail end of this economic boom that we've had. There are a lot of companies that went public over the last 5 to 10 years. One example would be, what's the meat alternative company?
Beyond Meat.
Beyond Meat, right? I mean, they had an amazing IPO, and all of a sudden, everything just dipped. It's the expectation of what something is worth, what people will pay for it. And we saw this with a lot of companies, that they would have insane initial listings. Like their stock prices would be crazy on the expectation that something amazing was going to happen with their company, with their earnings, because you kept seeing that with other companies. It lasted for a little while, and then a lot of them started crashing. This is the weird nature of the stock market, and like Henning mentioned, like net worth of something. You have a company that can be valued at $200 billion because people have an expectation of something being worth that. I think GameStop is another great example of that, where fundamentally nothing changed for a long time. You have crazy people on Reddit buying a meme stock all of a sudden with the expectation of value going up. people fighting against the hedge funds who are then shorting the stock to keep the price down. But all of it is expectation, while fundamentally nothing has changed with the companies. That's what makes this crazy, and why I think now, where people are less likely to spend money, we're all more wary of the economic situation. You're seeing a lot of this, I guess, this expectation of profit. People don't have the same expectation anymore, and they don't expect the same kind of growth. And we see every sector almost dropping from that.
Yeah, before this inflation happened, people were really hiring for growth. They were Some people in like the company world call it like peacetime and wartime mode. If you're in peacetime, you're focusing on growth. That's what you're seeing in the Google offices, right? All the LinkedIn offices where they have so many perks. At least they used to. You have like awesome little pods. You have crazy benefits, like really high salaries, unlimited time off, like whatever Americans think these are. I'm not an American. I don't know what specifically these things mean. But regardless, just really good perks. And that's peacetime. The moment there is wartime, that's when you're fighting for your survival. This can be either because there is an economic downtrend, or it could be because there's massive competition in the market. And there's both at the moment. There's a crazy amount of game studios, and technology has also allowed it to be easier to create VFX and to create games. Today, you can buy a fairly like mid-tier computer, and you can produce fairly high-end quality in terms of games and such. Well, 20 years ago, this was a very different kind of story. So competition has increased, and they're just more in wartime mode, where they're going into self-preservation. We felt the both of FlippedNormals when COVID happened.
Yeah.
We had more cash because of people were just buying more online, and then we're seeing it today that people are buying less online, and then we're going more into wartime. We're going more into preservation, which is just something we have to do. We can't be just lavish with our spending, but also just personally as well. When it comes to it, like your salary remains probably the same. You might have had an increase, you might not have, but inflation is just crazy high. Like my rent increased by 10% this year, which is just a lot. And I felt I was lucky. Like there are people whose living in London here, the housing market is insane. But there are people whose rent has doubled from like £1,500 to £3,000 a month. Completely insane. You just have people just have less money now than they used to. Very few people would have more money now than they did like 2 years ago.
I mean, I'm kind of in a similar situation there as well, where about a year ago, my wife and I, we bought our house. And about a year and a half ago, we looked at the financing for everything. And it was just at the end of these amazing times for interest rates, right? Like a year before that, people were getting loans with negative interest rates, 0, 1%, 1.5%. And when we started looking at our house and talking to the bank about financing, we were around 2%. 2% was crazy. You get a 30-year mortgage for 2%. We would have expenses on the house for, I don't know, £600-700 a month. This is going to be great, we thought. Okay, skip forward a couple months when we were able to sign the financing for it. It had doubled. It had doubled in 4 months, I think it was, because we weren't able to do the financing yet because it was like a new house. So there's like you couldn't get locked into it before the house was finished, I think, and so we ended up on 4%. Now from 2 to 4%, just number wise, doesn't sound like a lot, but it is still doubling your expenses, and that's where we sit now, with double the expenses that we were expecting when we first started looking at buying a house. And that's kind of just the reality of what's been happening around the world. Increases in rent, that's the same thing. You might have landlords that have financing to pay for the apartments that people are living in. Their loans are going up as well. Maybe they have flexible loans that change every 6 months or every year. That was very popular, especially in the past 5 to 10 years, to have these not fixed rate mortgages. Well, a lot of people did that as well, but the flexible mortgages, because you get such low interest rates. Well, then come January, a lot of those loans you have to remortgage again, and then your loan might go from 1% to maybe 3%, and unfortunately, then the landowners or the landlords will have to offset that cost onto the tenants, and the same thing with people buying houses.
And there are people who would kill for a 4% mortgage now. I mean, a lot of people now, there, if you were to be buying now, you might be looking at a 7% as well.
Yeah,
It's completely insane. And this is where we have a lot of boomers who keep talking about how like, but this is what we had in the 80s. We had like 70s, 80s. We had much more. But a house cost a quarter then. Like
Yeah.
they were so cheap compared back then, where a lower number of a higher number is just a lot more money than a high
Yeah.
number of a low number. Like 7% of like 500,000 is just a lot more than like 10% of like 100,000. Right? Like it's just,
Yeah.
the numbers are just completely different. Like it's a very unique challenge for, particularly for people like in our generation here, where they might be looking at buying a house and they can't afford to, or they've been buying houses and they're buying it when interest rates are high. If you bought like 20 years ago, a lot of that is going to be paid off now. So the interest rates affects you far less. But if you just bought it in the last few years, like this is going to have a massive impact on your economy. And this is what we're seeing. I mean, obviously what we're talking about, we haven't been speaking so much about specific games and VFX at this point, but this here is we'll get there. This is what affects the whole market. This is the underlying thing for everything. If people have a much higher mortgage and their money's being eaten up by inflation, you're not going to spend less money on milk or on groceries, at least not to a substantial degree, because that stuff is essential. If you need gas in your car, you just need gas in your car. But buying the latest PlayStation game, like you might as well just maybe wait until the sale, right? You might as well just wait until it's no longer like games have increased as well. They might just, instead of spending £70 on a game, maybe you'll just wait until it's like 50. Because we're also seeing a lot of games like 6 months later, they're much cheaper. So that impacts things as well. But yeah, the puzzling thing for me for this whole thing, particularly in games, since VFX strikes, if there's strikes, you can't produce things. But in games, this has been the best year, I think, as far as I can remember in terms of game releases. Very specific here in wording, not for game developers. This has probably been the worst year in memory for game developers. But in terms of pure gamers, in terms of the games coming out, this has been an insane year for that. I've never seen so many 9 or 10 games coming out in like ever. It's been fantastic. So why on earth are they laying off their people then? What is going on here?
Yeah, and I think the easy thing there is, and what we're seeing a lot, is jumping with, if you don't have like knowledge on what's been happening in the economy in general, I think it's very easy. The first thing you go to is either something that's really prevalent in in the artist industry or the visual industry is AI. And the other thing, which is just a very natural thing, is you see record earnings for companies, they're firing, and then it's company greed. So AI and company greed are really two prevalent things that at least I see a lot. And that's what I think people tend to blame. I think it's a lot more nuanced than that, and I hope that this little intro gives you a little bit of perspective on what else could be contributing to all of this. Not saying that AI and corporate greed aren't part of it, but we just need to establish like a common baseline so we know sort of what we're talking about.
The AI is a really interesting one, because the way I kind of see AI now is illustration and concept art is different. That's where the AI can actually is disrupting things. But in terms of game and film, I see it as a high visibility but fairly low impact at this point. It might be more of a mental toll on people. They would want to become artists for years, and now they feel a bit defeated with it. Like you can just press a button and it looks fantastic. But in terms of the actual productions, they're not really using AI yet. They might be using it in image generation. Some companies are just banning that. They're not allowed to do that. There are just copyright reasons that are just really, really dangerous for companies to do. I mean, in games, you need to concept art basically every single prop, because it's too dangerous to even have to have likeness with anything there. But in terms of the actual impact, I don't see AI having a direct financial impact on this at this point.
Not at the moment, no. You know, we talked about that AI is definitely having an impact on on Hollywood, the film industry. That's, you know, AI writing and all that with like protecting writers rights and actors' rights, there's definitely a one-to-one correlation there. But like when it comes to game, I think it's a little trickier to say that it does. Obviously, some studios are using AI now, and some are using it for image generation. It might not be something that they're publicizing or talking about, but it's definitely happening. But the impact right now, I still think is minimal. The way that I view it is that I would say 6 to 8 months ago, Midjourney really started picking up, and especially in the last 6 to 3 months, it went crazy with Midjourney, and then others started popping up. Stable Diffusion got more popular. Uh, Dolly 3 also super popular. I think even Chat GPT has some kind of image generation now. So we're definitely seeing it a lot, and we're getting exposed to it a lot. But from what I was seeing, and it's not discounting the technology and what it's capable of, is sort of, I think it peaked very quickly, and it's sort of it. I wouldn't call it flatlined, but development has definitely slowed. Like it's reached a certain peak. It's like this is what we're able to produce right now with images. That freaked all of us out because we saw basically from 0 to 100 that happened, in the span of months, or at least that's what it felt like. But I think the next levels, especially getting into like porting it to 3D and having it create 3D objects, will take even longer. It might happen. And it'll probably happen faster than I think it will. But at the moment, I still think we're kind of safe. But it's harder when we talk about concepting and illustration because AI just is developing really fast, and it's doing something that, and I think that's what makes me the most sad, is that it's doing something that I thought wouldn't be replaceable in terms of what we're able to do. Like we just had this chat here. And most of our expectations a few years ago was like, okay, AI, and what is AI going to do for humanity? It's going to replace all the hard and physical jobs, all the like blue collar jobs, right? Where these are things that people work really hard for, like truck drivers, or they're mailmen, or they're doing really labor intensive stuff, and maybe we could use AI to automate that and create other jobs. But we're seeing the opposite happen. We're seeing AI come in and take the jobs that, at least in my mind, was like, there's no way that an AI is going to be able to do that. Being creative, coming up with concepts. That's, I think, been the biggest like mindfuck for me is seeing that happen.
Yeah, if you 3 years ago would have told me that in like 2022 you're going to have technology that's going to be able to create fairly photorealistic images just with a prompt, I would have been like, yeah, okay, cool, buddy. Maybe it's going to take accounting first, or something that's more like numbers based. And then turns out what ChatGPT has issues with is numbers. I mean, a computer can do art, but it can't do numbers. I was using it the other day to like try to count something, and it got the count wrong. It was like, how many words are in here, and it was off by like an order of magnitude of 3. It was way off, and it can't count, but it can do art. Like, what on earth is going on here? This was not on my bingo card. That accounting would be not safe, at least like safer than art. That is, it shows how unpredictable this kind of stuff is, and that's why I'm also hesitant to make predictions about these kind of things. I've been talking to people about like the future of AI, and a lot of people seem to have very specific predictions with like where ChatGPT is going to go in Midjourney. But ChatGPT hasn't been out for a year yet. It came out end of November last year, and already that's been disrupting so much. Not so much in art and in games, but more in like programming or like general startup land. Tons of companies or tons of people have made startups as rappers on ChatGPT and such, and we just don't know where it's going to go because it's the tech has been there for less than a year. How on earth can we predict like a 3 or even a 5 year plan for this? I just think this is disruptive stuff. I think the reason people are afraid of AI is not because it looks like crap. If it looked like crap, like legit looked like crap, I don't think people would be scared of it. Then it would just be, that's what we had like some years ago, where you could like, I think the Face App came out, I think that was like 2019, and you could just add a mustache to yourself, and it was just a pure novelty, right? I thought it was interesting, but it was a novelty at that point. But people weren't really scared. But the moment they started producing things that actually looks really good, that's when people are looking scared. So I'm not buying the argument that it looks like crap. I mean, it looks I think it looks good, and I think that's
Yeah.
why people are scared about it. Like there are issues in terms of the looks as well. It can't get certain things right, but it can get a lot of things right as well. The biggest concern there is of course the ethical part as well. Like that's it looks good as well, but like the images look good, but the ethics behind it, that's highly problematic. And
Yeah.
a lot of times when there's new technology like this, we one of the reasons we can't predict it is not because we can't predict the tech, we can't, but it's also because we can't predict the legislation. What if there is EU or US legislation happening right now that people need to give consent to provide their data, and if they haven't been given consent, if they haven't given consent for that, then the data isn't valid, and you have to destroy your data. Like that could happen. And
Yeah.
I've seen investors talk about this, that but copyright is terrible because AI, the tech is progressing slower and there's less profit to be made. Yeah, but so what? Like you're not entitled to profit over data that you haven't been granted access to in an ethical and legal manner. So we don't know what could happen there. The models could eat themselves. You could have model death. It's impossible to tell what's going to happen. But right now, back to the conversation, I don't think it has had a massive impact on the state of the economy. I don't think that game companies are firing like crazy because they're planning on just replacing them with AI. The tech just isn't there. Even if they were just like cartoony villains trying to just replace everyone with a computer, how would they do that? Like what software would there be? Would you have 200 MacBooks just running ChatGPT and feeding into DALL-E? Like it doesn't work at this point.
No, it's yeah, I think you have to get very granular and you have to look at very specific use cases when we're talking about this. And I mean, for sure, it's interesting what's happening with the technology, but like you said, the ethics around it is the problematic part. And we're seeing that now with, which is a strange one, where Adobe introduced their generative fill thing in Photoshop, and it seemed like it was doing a lot of crazy things. And then they open up, I think, Adobe stock to have generative AI or something on it, and all of a sudden, because I haven't looked into this massively, so I'm not entirely sure, but like it looks like there are prompts, like the written prompt or something is on Adobe stock, and all of a sudden you're seeing people putting up images that clearly were prompting from artists that definitely hadn't given consent to have their art like trained, like the model weren't supposed to be trained on their art. So I think it's really hard to, like, once you open Pandora's box, like closing it again, which, so that makes it an interesting thing to follow and see what's going to happen there. I think copyright, especially with visual stuff like ours, it's important to be on top of, but what's going to happen there is impossible to say.
Yeah, one area that AI actually has had an impact is, back to the financing here, is on a stock market, like the US stock market in particular. Because the stock market in the US is not doing particularly well, but it kind of looks like it's doing all right. If you look at like the just the pure indexes, it's actually doing all right. But it's because there are 7 companies that are contributing to nearly all the gains in the US stock market. And these 7 companies aren't just random. These companies are companies that people assume are going to be the winners in the AI market, like Meta, Google, Tesla, a few others here, and Nvidia, which of course are producing the chips. So we were talking about this the other day, like why, like in 2008 when the financial crisis happened, it felt like a financial crisis. There was like a crash, right?
Yeah.
It was proper, like you were like, okay, stuff is actually bad now, but it doesn't really feel like that. It's almost like just like a war of attrition in a sense, or you just kind of, it just kind of slowly degrades. But one of the reasons is the moment the stock market actually goes boom, that's like a very tangible way. It's a very easy way to measure it. And currently, few companies investing in AI are holding the whole thing up. But that's hype. Like you buy a stock because you think it's going to go up more in the future. That could, like, depending on the promise of AI, that could also just collapse. It's so hard to say what's going to happen. And if that collapses, then we are in for more pain. Because people are going to want to cut their losses. It's an interesting one, like how the stock market connects directly to the market, because the stock price, I always thought the stock price was like connected to the actual well-being of the company, like it was like an automatic peg or something. But it's not. Like if you look at Tesla, the amount of cars they're producing compared to like Ford or Toyota or something is like, it's negligible compared to it, and the stock price is way, way, way higher than like the competing car manufacturers.
I can't remember the exact numbers here, but it's something like, in terms of pure valuation, right? Tesla's valuation is way higher than all of the three biggest combined. It's something crazy like that. Where in terms of production and it, like there's definitely there's a disconnect there, and I think a lot of that is also down to Elon Musk. He's sort of the same thing with the way that Apple was when Steve Jobs was still alive. Was there was no Apple without Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was Apple. He was the face of Apple. It was like people knew Steve Jobs as well as they knew Apple, which is like you don't commonly know the CEO of a company. Like I can't name the CEO of I don't know, Netflix or the people that make Nesquik or whatever. Like I don't know, but we know that Elon Musk is the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, and we knew that Steve Jobs was the CEO of Apple. And so a lot of that hinges on them as a personality. And you see that with Elon doing crazy shit on Twitter all the time, and he's constantly bringing attention to himself. And that, of course, also brings attention to the companies in good or bad ways.
To kind of illustrate how the stock market impacts the economy and also impacts games and film in this regard. In Denmark, you have a company, I can't remember the name, but they're producing a weight loss drug called Ozempic, which is actually like a revolutionary weight loss drug. It seems to be one of the ones that actually
Novo.
work. Yeah, there you go. And I watched a video on this recently where that's the company's gains in the stock market is pretty much the reason why Denmark hasn't been in a recession now. Like Denmark was about to go into a recession, but because of this single company holding the line in terms of the stock market, it's like way bigger than anything else in the Danish stock market. It just held the line there, and they didn't go into a recession because of that, which doesn't make any logical sense, because you would be assuming that the start, like a recession is, well, people have more or people have less money, not just like, oh, it's one giant companies or like seven giant companies that's holding the line. It's an insane system for kind of measuring if people are doing well or not. Where
I think it's an interesting example there, because I think the reason it works is Denmark is such a tiny country, right? And then you have Novo making Ozempic, which goes to a gigantic market, which is the US. And the US has what, like 350 million people now, or it's probably even more now.
Yeah.
And with how many obese people medically are in the US, how many are taking Ozempic now, it's actually, it kind of makes sense with demand that they, with what they've been able to produce. Just as a side, I think Ozempic it's an interesting case study in what's actually happening with the medication, because there are people that need Ozempic, or what it's derived from, or what it's based off of. Like Ozempic, I believe, is the brand name, not the actual drug. The actual drug is called something else, and it's been around for a long time, as far as I understand.
Diabetics.
Exactly. So, and now there are demand issues because people are using it a lot for weight loss, but also for weight loss when they don't necessarily need it. More of a cosmetic thing, which leads to supply chain issues with people who have diabetes, for example. It's an interesting thing that's happened with that, and obviously sad that people who really need that kind of drug can't get it at the moment. Sorry, just a tangent there, but
so the podcast is for. It's an interesting thing with the whole, like, are we in a recession or not? Because it kind of depends, right, what metrics you're using. But one of them is kind of entirely not the correct one to measure it in terms of pure economics. But if you're asking people, are you better off or you're worse off now than you were? Just most people are just worse off. And that's kind of like, no matter how you're measuring the GDP or something, it's just a case that if people are worse off, they're spending less money. Like it just goes to that.
And what do we have? Like the economic definition of a recession is 2 quarters. Is it 2 quarters in a row with negative growth?
I think that's one of the ways.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously massively complex, but I that's one of the ways to measure it.
Yeah. So I guess we should just kind of move the conversation back to like games as well. Like there's a fact that there's been
games.
Speaking of weight loss drugs and the Danish stock market, the fact that there has been 6,500 people, like that's just the estimate. I found a really good website for this called videogame.layoffs.com.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And it just shows all of it. And when you're scrolling on that side, I'm currently doing that now, like that's a pretty scary one. There was somebody on Twitter who was listing all the companies that had layoffs this year, and it's actually crazy seeing the amount of layoffs. Like, it's surprising actually that it's not just from game companies themselves, but the biggest layoffs by far here have been from Unity and Epic. Unity has currently had 900 people laid off in this year, like some in January and some like some months ago now, and I think it was May, maybe not some months ago. And then you had Epic that just had a massive 830 people lay off as well. Where that's crazy, because they're making the tools and they're presumably doing really well. But this can also have to do with, like, specifically why this is. We've been genuinely trying to look into this, and some of this is going to be investors and shareholders who's just like, look, you were growing a lot, and when you're growing, it's really good to have a high headcount. That means you have potential to expand into. But if you're expecting a recession, then it's good to have a lower headcount, because then first it means you have less expenses, but also it means that you're just generally more prepared for a recession. So some of this is definitely due to shareholders wanting more profit, right? And there's just no way about that. That's definitely in the corporate greed kind of territory. And in some of this as well is also definitely mismanagement as well. This is something we've seen in VFX, which I'm more familiar with, where you had COVID destroyed the industry. It was the most ruthless thing that we've seen in VFX. Everything stopped. Of course, the difference now is that now everything did the same, but there's no government handouts because of government support, right? Because of there was no furlough or anything now. But everything stopped in 2020, and it was rough for some time. And then everything came back. Everything came back at the same time, and people in VFX were actually doing really well. Like, they were, if you were starting a new job about 1 to 2 years ago now, you were probably giving quite a raise in VFX. I know a lot of people who got like a 10-20k pay increase for that. And companies are like, holy crap, the party is starting again. And they're expanding. These dumb companies are now expanding. They just they just had the worst times they've ever had, and now the party started again, and they're just like, oh, okay, this is never going to. And then they're starting new locations, and they're buying other companies, and they're mergers and acquisitions everywhere. And this is really bad. This stuff here is really bad, because this shows definitely like both corporate greed and mismanagement as well, because the two, of course, tied together. You want more. You just want more of what you currently have. You want more money. And but starting new studios, that of course is a way to grow. If you're working in VFX, you're basically a freelancer. You're as a company, right? You're just a vendor. You don't have any IPs or any, and you don't really make any money apart from just VFX projects. And then you just need more of it. That's the one way you really scale up. And these companies didn't start to think that maybe we should just chill out for just a little bit. Let's just see where stuff happens. COVID is not at all over in terms of the financial impact of this. Maybe we should just see where this goes, save up some cash here, and just be a little bit conservative with this instead of just spending all our money to expand. Because if you're expanding and starting a new studio in like Australia, that a lot of them did over the last few years, that stuff takes years to recuperate. You can't just go down there and open up a facility and then just start making money. It takes years to recuperate that investment, because you have to like rent the location or buy the location. Most likely you're renting it. So now you have a lot of money in there. You have maybe a 5 or 10 year contract, who knows? And then you need to get staff over. You need to hire local staff. You need to establish a company culture. You have to set up everything. You have to buy a lot of computers. Stuff is just expensive, and they just couldn't just chill out for a few years. Just take a breather.
It's also tricky, right? Because like you see an economic boom, and as a company, it's natural for you to want to grow. And maybe now things are looking good. You've had your eyes set on expanding or whatever, and now seems like the right time to do it. It's also tricky, right? Because like we talked about before, you can't predict the future. Obviously, if you knew things were heading to a recession, sure, you're not going to expand. That would be terrible. But it's a really tricky thing, but because as a company, you're constantly teetering on that whole like, okay, how do we grow so that we can make more money, but also how do we not go bankrupt by spending too much money? It's a really delicate balance. And unfortunately, employees oftentimes are, I mean, you aren't like part of the equation to that extent. That's just an expense. It's just another expense. So how do we
Payroll.
manage expenses? It is payroll. And that's why you often hear that, like, as an employee, you're just a number on a piece of paper. And that is true. That's why we've talked about this before in our videos as well, with the whole company culture is great, but you don't owe a company anything. At any point in time, they can let you go. They don't need you anymore. And companies that often talk about, we're back, we're a happy family, and everyone's in it together, except you aren't, because you're still getting paid from the company, and their interests are ultimately to them, not to you. You might have individual managers in the company, or even the CEO in the company, that really cares for their employees and just wants the best for them, but ultimately they're looking out for the company. And that's why we've talked about this, Henning and I, before, where company greed is such a tricky term to throw around, because yes, companies are greedy. Companies look out for one thing, and pretty much one thing only, and that's they need to be able to sustain themselves and grow. That's what shareholders are interested in. That's what they themselves are interested in. That's just the nature of business. It's not like something has magically changed, you know? Companies do what companies have always done. And like, they didn't wake up just a couple months ago and decided to be even more greedy or even more of a company. They are just companies, just an entity with very few goals, and they need to hit those goals. And in order to get there, oftentimes that comes with layoffs, cutting costs in terms of getting rid of employees.
And now as well, VFX and games and really the whole creative sector, it's a mature sector, meaning that in the 90s, you had a lot of really small studios that they were just kind of mucking about and producing games. But today, the companies have been acquired and reacquired and bundled up and split up, and there might not be any resemblance of the original companies when they were founded. I mean, hell, Nintendo was from like the 1800s. Blew my mind, right? So like, there is, particularly for Nintendo, there is nobody left of the original founders, right?
No.
And but in a lot of other companies, not just because of the linearity of time, there is just nobody left in the company because of acquisitions. If you've been acquired as a company, the founders are probably going to get out of there as soon as they can, or they might have golden handcuffs, which means that they can't for some time. But the moment they can, they might just get out of there and start their own thing. This happens all the time. And these people, they really cared about their companies, but they might also be doing it for 20 years. So they're like, look, I'm done now. I want to do something else. I want to jet ski now. And then then the people who take over, they take over not because they are here to nurture the company culture. They don't really necessarily have any feelings towards the employees or anything. What they care about is they see this as an asset that they can buy, that they can either keep getting annual returns out of because it's a profitable company, or they think they can just milk this and sell this off to a lot of other companies later on. This happens to, for instance, to like the Foundry, which keeps being like bought and sold by investment companies. The Foundry is not owned by the original founders anymore. And like, there you had an example, right? Like, you had Luxology, who created Moto back in the days, and they really cared about their company, and then they were acquired by the Foundry, called it a merger. It's pretty much an acquisition, and then the company as a whole is just being bundled around and moved around and sold by investment companies, where they're just trying to maximize the profits. And this happens all the time, where if you're being laid off now in a games company, there was a large chance that like nobody even in the nearest vicinity of you in terms of hierarchy even made that decision. It might be somebody in a completely different part of the world who might, like, maybe the parent company just tells the daughter company here that you need to just lay off 30% of your staff. And it's not like you necessarily just have a lot of people who aren't performing in their jobs and it's easy to lay off. A lot of people are, obviously there are a lot of very highly qualified people who's working here, but if you need to just lay off 30% of your staff, you need to lay off 30% of your staff, and it just becomes a numbers game. It becomes like they might do some kind of skill matrix or something like that. The government might force them to do anything like this. Doesn't matter how you perform, they're just gonna they're just gonna cut who they
Yeah.
want to cut, and the manager is going to be really sad for those days. The humans, right? The CEO might be really upset, and ultimately, it's a numbers game. It's
Yeah, I think, and also when you have giants like we have within the games industry as well. Obviously, not giants to the same extent that you have with like Nestle. That's the company that. There we go.
the
Got
Nestle
it.
company.
Where it might go something like this. They know that they have to cut costs, right? So they need to close some offices and fire some people. So what they do, they find a consultant company that'll advise them on how to fire people, who should be fired, and all that. They send that report to the company. The parent company then goes, well, we own 4 other companies, and company number 1 is doing great. Company number 2 is not doing as great, but company 1 needs to save money. So what we'll do is we'll offset the cost of firing to company number 2 so that company number 1 can grow. So even this company number 2, who might not have done anything wrong, they will now bear the burden of this like sub company number 1. So it's like it can be so far removed that at the end of it, it really just isn't about people for a company. It is just numbers on a piece of paper. And I think that makes it even more tricky, especially when we see mass layoffs like this in games with Epic and Unity firing like close to 900 people or something each. That's brutal, and that's a massive cost cutting measure from the company.
Yeah, and this could be to impact the stock price, for instance. Maybe the investors just want to juice the stock price a bit, or it might be a legit financial concern. Maybe parts of their core business is no longer making as much money as they're doing. Maybe they're still making decent money, but they can see that the projections are going down, or the numbers each quarter is going down, and that goes downwards. But a massive problem here is overhiring during COVID. Like it just
Yeah.
the amount of people they fired now might be the same amount of people they hired during COVID. I saw this all the time during like the last few years. People were just being hired all the time. You had lots of graduates who were really excited because they were hired at like massive companies. Also, so many people who joined massive companies like Blizzard and Epic. It felt like everyone I knew at some point was just joining Epic, and then now they fired 830 people. Like they overhired. And it might not even have been that maybe it wasn't even a mistake from their point of view. Obviously, it really sucks to let people go, but maybe they just saw it as yeah, we can use these people to expand now, and then once we don't need them, we're just going to get rid of them again. Or maybe it was just a legit case of they thought the party was going to keep going forever. Regardless, they overhired, like the whole industry overhired back some years ago, and now they're stuck with that.
I mean, and this just as from a more personal example, like if you take FlippedNormals as an example, we for a few years we were seeing like 100% growth year over year. COVID happened. It's like, okay, great. COVID is bad, but people are now home with money and free time, so now they're increasing online spending. Okay, we grow another 100%, and then things start to go bad. All of a sudden, we're down 20% in a year. Next year, okay, now we're still down. This is the kind of trend that we're seeing everywhere. And that's also why when you have companies like Henning talked about with Luxology getting acquired by the Foundry, getting bought by a hedge fund, that happens so much. Hedge funds come in, they throw companies around because it is just an investment for them. They get them in. They need them to focus on growth and profitability, like extreme growth for maybe 3 to 5 years. And now it's time for them to offload their asset. They sell that to another hedge fund who might see potential in them, and then they try to get them to grow even further. And that's been the cycle for a lot of years. Obviously, you hit a cap at some point where you can't sustain this kind of growth, this kind of explosive growth that a lot of companies have had. And eventually you'll end up with a hedge fund or some people that just, well, they're stuck holding the bag, and now things start to go down, decrease in price, and now they can't offset their asset. They might have taken up massive loans, aka Netflix, to buy stuff, and now they have billions of dollars in debt that they kind of need to pay off with interest all the time. And that again leads back to employees in the company as the easiest cost cutting a measure.
The tricky thing when it comes to cost cutting is that you can't really just sell your computers, and a computer isn't even that expensive. It's a few $1,000s. And so if you were to just cut the computer, then first off, you don't have a computer anymore, which obviously is a problem. But let's say a person costs you $100,000 a year. That in Europe, that's quite high. Salaries aren't really that high, but in US, that's not an outrageous salary for a game artist at all. And particularly if you were living in like the major hubs, like in VFX as well, in Los Angeles and New York, particularly California is so expensive. So like that is not an outrageous cost. So if by cutting one person, you're cutting at least, if their salary is 100,000, you're cutting at least 100,000 away from your budget there per year. And it's hard to cut costs in other way when you're basically providing a service. What other costs do you realistically cut? You can cut down the pizza parties, but pizza just isn't that expensive, right? A few $100s a month for pizza, like it's nothing. So company excursions, or there aren't any of those. There just isn't a lot of stuff, a lot of areas you can cut down. One area you could cut down is you can be work from home. But a lot of companies, they might own their own offices, or they have many years left on their leases, and they don't really want to cut that yet. But that's something that I'm sure is going to happen in the future. Companies starting without an office, but at least for whatever reason, currently companies are not cutting that expense.
I think also not to, and again, I just want to emphasize this is not in any way like a look. The companies are doing it, and just deal with it. This is what it is. It's like, we're trying to give you context, and it's not that we're on the side of the companies and people doing the layoffs. It's just we're just trying to give you context from like all of this background knowledge here. And a popular thing that I think a lot of people might bring up is, well, you have all these cost cutting measures, firing employees, that takes away some of the salary. But what about the higher ups, the ones that are paid more? Have the CEO who's making $10 million a year, take some of that salary and then put it into workers. But oftentimes, CEO salaries are, yes, they can be disproportionate, especially in US companies. That can get crazy. But oftentimes, there is still some sort of proportional relationship to what the company makes and what the CEO makes. And so cutting away part of their salary ultimately doesn't really solve the problem when you have thousands. Like take Meta, for example. They fired something like 10,000 people.
I think they had 20,000 people layoffs this year so far.
That's insane. And so whatever managers are getting paid and stuff, at the end of the day will be negligible compared to normal employees because there are just so many more of them. And it's a tough thing because you look at the people that just make a lot more money and say, well, can't we just redistribute it? You could, and maybe some companies are willing to help offset some of the costs so you don't have to fire as many people. That's where I think a lot of the corporate greed comes in. We're like, well, you got to be able to do something. But unfortunately, employees are really expensive to have. You brought this up, I think, yesterday, Henning, when we talked about this. Let's say you have $100,000 in salaries for an employee. That's not the cost of an employee. You have a lot more costs connected to them, whether it be healthcare, and you have to have insurance on as a company in your building for if stuff happens, if your employee wrecks something in the company or damages something. There's a lot of hidden costs connected to one employee, and then you multiply that by 10, 20,000, and that gets really expensive.
Yeah, the cost is not just your salary. That would be in a case if you hire just a pure freelancer who works from home and they have to provide their own equipment. But bigger offices, more tech, you also need a lot of infrastructure and just pure with people. Like you need more people, more HR, more recruiters, and also a hidden cost, which is kind of, you're not very productive and valuable in the beginning of a contract. Like when you're starting a new place, it probably takes you a few months to really get into an area where you're actually profitable for the company. So hiring a lot of people as well is very expensive, which also is why they shouldn't be stupid about it, right? If you hire 10,000 people, you know it's going to take a lot of time for that to really be worth it. But it's like if you were to look at a CEO salary of like $10 million, but let's say you have like the company sells for like their net sales might be like, let's say $2 billion. The CEO salary is really a fraction of it. Yes, it's insane how high they are. We're not defending CEO pay here. They're insane. But like particularly if you look at like Bobby Kotick, I think like the CEO of what is it, like Activision Blizzard? I guess no, maybe not Blizzard anymore. But regardless, like insane.
Oh, yeah.
It's like hundreds of millions of dollars a year. No person earns that amount. Like you're not worth that amount in terms of the company. But they have their agreements. They have their agreements where like it might be tied to stock price increase or just stock price in general. But yeah, that's an insane rate. And that is also an abnormal rate. And in that case, if you had $200 million, you can definitely distribute that and help the employees. But if the underlying economy that we've been talking about now is not doing well, yes, you should cut executive pay for sure. They should also for sure have to, like, there should be layoffs there, and there should be pay cuts there as well for sure. But if the underlying financials aren't strong anymore, you don't have that many levers to press or to pull as a company.
Yeah, and we've seen that a lot where I think there's a lot of desperation now, and we've experienced that ourselves as well. Like all of last year, I think we talked about that in the previous podcast. Like all of last year, we went without a salary in an effort to try and get things back on track while we were having a lot of development. And even this year, there have been months. We just had 2 months not too long ago where we didn't get salaries again to try and offset all of the costs with development. And in a way, it's been the same for us. We've had to let that team go, the team of developers. Now, they weren't personally employed by FlippedNormals. We hired an agency for it, and they still have their jobs, which is great. So we could use them for the job that we needed, and now they're on to other jobs, and they still have their job, which is great. But we, in a sense, we're facing the same issue where it's like, well, either cut our expenses massively, or we'll have to close the company. Like we can't keep doing this in this type of economy. And yeah, that's the tricky part, especially. I can empathize with people running a company because we've run a company. So I feel like we've seen some of the more unfortunate sides of that. But it still sucks, obviously. And you see that sometimes with companies where you have an actual empathetic CEO who goes, you know what, I'll cut my salary so we can redistribute it to more employees. We'll still have to let some people go. And that's an amazing way of doing it, especially if your company can still thrive off of that. Unfortunately, not everyone is going to do it, especially like we talked about when you have multiple levels of companies being removed. Like they're firing like a company that's like in the third hierarchy of companies that they just happen to own. They have no connection to it. They just care about the numbers at that point, and that's really unfortunate.
What you have a lot as well is once you're in a mature market, you go from founder-led companies that they do have empathy with their employees, at least hopefully, right? Like they understand the business. Actually, like Facebook or Meta is one of those. Not saying that Zuckerberg is empathetic. I don't know Zuckerberg, but at least he's like, it's founder-led. And that's rare. That's extremely rare that you have a company of that maturity. And
yeah,
you have professional CEOs who, what they do is they just CEO. Like being a CEO is obviously an insane position to be in. Like it's not like an easy position to have, but so you need somebody who's specialized at like the managerial part. The higher up you go in the food chain in a company, the more abstract the knowledge becomes. It becomes more soft skills. If you're starting in a company as a junior artist, it's like you need to be able to read topologize. You need to have excellent knowledge of the software. Then you get higher up and become more of a lead, and it becomes more about managing people, right? Sure, you have to manage some stuff, but you need to be good at managing people. And then you go up to like supervisor or managerial and all that, and it's all about managing people. It becomes way more soft skill and it's way more like abstract. It's hard to quantify your skills there. Once you get to CEO, you're not touching the day-to-day product. You're not really doing any code or doing any kind of like assets, right? And that's one of the reasons why people kind of are professional CEOs. They move around from company to company, and they might stay there for only a few years. They might want to increase the stock price and then leave again to somewhere else, and they don't have any personal emotions towards it. So if they have to go in and they have to fire a bunch of people, they're apathetic towards that in that regard. Like their job is just to work for the company. They don't know the names of the people who work there, or they don't have a personal connection with it. They might not even work on site, right?
Yeah, I think it's we have someone close to us who's the CEO of a fairly large company, and I've talked a lot with him about sort of strategy and what it takes to develop a company and the mindset around running a company, but also running $1 billion company. And whenever we've had chats about it, I've always been confused, like, what does a CEO do? And whenever we talk about it, he's like, it's always hard to give direct examples. Like if you're a modeler in VFX, it's very easy. I make bricks, I make characters. That's it's very tangible, even though it's digital, but it's very tangible to explain what you do. But the higher up you come, the stranger it becomes, like the more abstract it becomes. But every time we've talked about stuff, it's always felt like a therapy session, unintentionally, but it's always felt like a therapy session where it's like, well, maybe you could think about it this way and think about it that way. And I think when you've been CEOing for a long time, especially for bigger companies, that's maybe where you end up. Obviously, you look at high level strategy of how to grow the company, but it's very much about making the company thrive, the company, and then in turn, when the company thrives, the employees should thrive if everything is managed properly. But that's been an interesting look into like the world of CEOs that I hadn't thought about because it was always such a mystery to me. Like, what do you do? Like what? Yeah, very strange.
My misunderstanding about this whole thing was also the fact that this is years ago, right? But I thought the CEO was the owner of the company. And like
Yeah.
a lot of companies, like particularly in the mature market, they don't really have like one owner. Like that's one, and again, a unique thing about Meta is that Zuckerberg is actually like, I'm not sure what he has, like 45% or something. At least he's majority. Like nobody can, like no
Oh
one
wow.
person can overrule
Yeah.
him. Like it's a significant amount
That's
of stock.
crazy.
It's crazy, right? And that's one of the reasons he's been able to be in charge, because nobody can like out him.
Yeah.
Nobody can just do a hostile takeover. What happened with Twitter as well. Musk basically did a hostile takeover of that whole thing, because there isn't like one person who's just in charge. But the CEO can just be a person who's hired. Like we could hire a CEO for FlippedNormals, right?
Yeah.
And that would just be somebody who's CEOing, and right, it's a whole different thing when it comes to that. Like obviously we come from art, so I think a lot of people have those misunderstandings as well. And particularly when you're dealing with, again, the mature companies that have, like what Mort mentioned before, like IPO, that just means you actually go in the stock market. FlippedNormals is a privately owned company. If you guys want to buy stock in us, we can't, right? But if you want to buy stock in like Tesla, you can, because it has gone IPO. And once it's on the stock market, then you don't necessarily have like majority or like somebody who just owns the whole thing. You just have a bunch of small guys, or right. So the ownership is just distributed. It becomes
Yeah.
very tricky when it comes to that. And these people here own stock in it. They absolutely do not care about the engineers or the game devs or like any of that. They don't know the industry at all. They just bought stock and they just want the line to go up in their portfolio, right?
And to really hammer that point in with employees ending up as numbers on a piece of paper, that's often what happens in these cases. Is that when you're a public company, your responsibility is to your shareholders first and foremost. That is the legal contract that you've entered with your shareholders. And the shareholders are interested in maximizing their profits, obviously, because a lot of that is owned by private people, but a lot of that is also owned by investment firms, hedge funds, and etc. And they really don't care. Their business is making money, and if the company that they're investing in doesn't make money, then it's bad business for them. And then they really don't care about the people. And the larger a share you have, maybe as a hedge fund, you have a sizable share in a company, you're able to put pressure on that company because you own such a large share of the company. Maybe you get together with more of the shareholders and then you start making demands. Like, okay, we can see this based on your last financial report. We want you to fire 20% of your company. That's what we think is the best course of action. And that's, then it gets even further removed, beyond what we talked about with like a consultancy or a consultant company that comes in and tells you how to optimize your company. There are so many abstract levels of this to be removed from actual people, their lives, how it might affect someone, that it's tricky to just blame corporate greed sometimes, because it's almost like general greed. It's not just corporate greed from that one company. It can be that one company is owned by 10,000 companies.
Yeah. Yeah, corporate greed is such a hard thing to define because it's just a human
Yeah.
trait. And yeah, corporate greed is for sure behind a lot of this kind of stuff. Like when you're expanding like crazy, you're hiring a lot of people, that's because you want to make more money. It's not because you want to be a sustainable little shop that generates billions a year. You want to have more billions.
Yeah.
But
And
I think it's
is that
time
a good?
to sorry, man.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's not really up to us to like say, oh, this is a good thing and this is a bad thing. It is really just about giving you a perspective on the inner workings of finance and companies for the ones that might not know a lot about it and are really frustrated with the situation. And we understand the frustration because we're feeling it as well. Even though we're not beholden to an employer because we're self-employed right now, we're still feeling the effects. And yeah, it's hard to say a lot of uplifting stuff about it because it really just sucks. It is a situation that sucks for a lot of people.
So, and speaking of that, I think that's kind of our next section, which is all right. So you think there's going to be a layoff at your company, and or you already been affected by it. What do you do about it? Like, what can you
Mm.
actually do about that? And the first thing is, if there is a layoff, based on all we talked about for about a good hour, there's nothing you can do about that. In terms of if you are being laid off, then you just can't change that because the decision it's being made somewhere like in a whole different part of the industry. So if you are being laid off, if you're being escorted out, or you know that your name is on a list here, that is just what it is. And
Yeah.
kind of the nice thing about that in a way is that you didn't do anything wrong here. Like you didn't screw up here. It's not that the people who get laid off are necessarily like the bad people. It obviously sucks to an insane degree, but like there's maybe a little bit of catharsis in knowing that you at least didn't do anything wrong. But like in terms of the pure layoff, if you lose your job, you lose your job with the company. There is no like bargaining with them or anything like that. They might appear to be bargaining. They might have some kind of like in the UK, I know they have to like justify some layoffs to the government or something. So they might do skills matrix and they might have to be a
Right.
representative from the company and such. But that's smoke and mirrors. In nearly every single case, that does not matter. If you come up with proposals for how you can do things, you can come up with a 4-day week or whatever. It doesn't matter. The company wants to do layoffs, and either there is no due process and they just lay you off, or there is just the illusion of it. Layoffs happen, and that's it, right?
Yeah. Now you kind of have to deal with the new reality of being unemployed in a market where thousands of people are unemployed at the same time, and that's the really tough part.
The first thing I would really recommend, like everyone now, if you're currently been laid off or you think you're going to be laid off, if you are on a visa, you need to go to the government website, call the embassy, whatever. Just be damn sure that you know exactly what the terms of the visa is, because I mean, hopefully you already know that because that's a very important document. But I know people here in the UK who are been laid off, and they've been from like non-EU countries. Not that that necessarily matters a lot now, but they've been from countries where you need a bespoke visa. You need just a specific one. And then if you get laid off, you might have, I don't know, a month or 2 months, a few months to leave the country. That is important that you know about. And that
Yeah.
means that your priorities kind of change from you want a similar paying job to just you just want to stay in the country. Right? Moving country and being kicked out of the country is ruthless. And particularly if you have, like in the UK, I think it's a 5 years and you get to your residency. If you've been here for like 4 years and you get kicked out, then those years are going to start over again if you've been out for a certain amount of time. So at that point, figure out the visa situation, figure out how you can legally stay in the country, because my God, everything revolves around that. Then I recommend that you stay in touch with colleagues, like make some kind of Discord server. If you're from Unity, maybe you have a, I don't know, Unity Discord server. Just make something that's outside of the company. You've been most likely been kicked off the Slack or Microsoft Teams, whatever it is. Make something else. Make an unofficial one for for people who's currently been laid off. The the market is going to pick up at some point, and if you're hired at a company, it's a lot easier to trust your recommendations for good people for hires than it is to just go through the front door. So if you might have a case here where a company is hiring 10 people and one let's just say for sake of argument, Unity employee gets hired there. They might just bring their old team back. Right, then you already have a bit of the culture between the people. They know each other. They can start working right away between each other. But also just you get to know about the opportunities. So I really think it's important to stay in touch with your former colleagues. It's a tricky one because they're also technically your competitor, which just makes this difficult. But I see this as a non-zero-sum game. Like, this is a case where everyone can win. Maybe you lost a job because your friend got it now, but in the future, they can help you get the job at a company. I think it's so important to don't just become like ruthless with this. Just try to stay more communal, stay in touch with them, and have a good relationship with them. Also, because if you're being laid off, particularly when there is a recession coming or already we're in one, then times are tough. Mental support is important. If you need to create new portfolio pieces and such, then staying in the voice chat of a Discord server with your former colleagues can be really lovely. It can be exactly what you need in terms of your mental health or just general encouragement. It's almost like you can, particularly now that people have been working remotely anyway, if you can just stay on a voice chat with your former colleagues, at least like day to day, you can at least have some of that like team spirit to a degree.
Yeah. Like for me, I had a similar experience as to kind of what is happening now. Obviously, the economy wasn't anywhere near as bad as it is now. But when I first moved to the UK and I got my first real job in VFX at Cinesite, I had a contract for 6 months. And I think it was 6 months, 5 or 6 months. And about a month before my contract ended, there was no possibility of extending. They weren't getting any more projects at that point. MPC laid off a bunch of people.
Where I was.
A month before, where Henning was, a month before my contract ended. And those people obviously went out and found other jobs. So, my contract ends and I'm new to the UK. I made like one friend at the company and we stayed in touch. But all of a sudden, I'm new to the country. I've been there for 6 months and I'm unemployed. And I think that lasted for another 6 months, maybe, before I found a job. And that was horrible for my mental health. I mean, I don't know if I was depressed, clinically depressed, who knows? But I was very sad. And, I didn't really keep up with friends. I didn't really do a lot. I found some freelance eventually, which really helped. But having that support network around you, I can definitely attest to that. It's great to have because that can really help you in those tough situations.
I remember that really well because we lived together. I mean, that was from, I think, like July of 2015 to like January 16, like about 6 months of just not being employed. And everything was, all the NPC people had just stolen all the jobs. Stolen it. They got jobs in a very legal manner. And I was on the other side of that because I was at NPC at a time and they kind of did the same thing here. They overhired for, I think it was Jungle Book, and then they fired basically all of them. In my department in assets, it was myself and 1 or 2 more people who remained from that hiring. And that was actually insane. Every single day I was expecting to just hear a knock on the door, just to be asked to be called into a meeting, because everyone around me was basically, like, out of the ones who were hired at that point, every single one apart from a few had that meeting and they got back out and they were either crying or they were just like distraught. And I was waiting for that and it never came. And obviously I'm not going to make a sub story about how I was not fired, right? But it's really stressful because you think you're going to get fired. And that is very, very stressful, particularly at this point where, like, we were both on fairly low salaries as well. In the UK, I was a junior as well. You don't really have any savings. And I think this kind of goes to like one of the next points, which is like okay, so you think there are going to be layoffs or there are layoffs. What do you do? And I think making portfolio pieces is a great idea. Get new pieces into your portfolio. Hopefully, at least at this point, since you are dealing with layoffs, you've actually been laid off from somewhere, so you have some commercial work to show. There's a large chance, of course, that's been under NDA. Maybe the project got scrapped and you don't have anything to show. I know that sucks in the games industry, where you've been working for years and you have literally nothing to show from it. But if there is anything you can show, any kind of promo material or anything like that, put her up in a portfolio. Do not put up NDA work in a portfolio unless it's heavily password protected. You don't want to get into trouble with this. being unemployed and getting into legal trouble, really, 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 really bad stuff.
Yeah,
But
that's bad.
put up what you have, and then try to produce new content as well. Try to produce new things that you are already good at. If there is something you have expertise at, in our case, right, we're character artists. If we needed a job like in a few months, we could use our expertise within character art and create a portfolio based on that. I don't think this is the time to try to experiment artistically and get your deep feelings out into your personal art. I think this is where you just have to be clever about it. If you have a marketable skill set, create pieces showing that skill set. Show it to an extremely high level. And this means that when stuff picks up again, you are ready. Or if you're not been laid off and you're and you think you're going to be laid off and you are laid off, then suddenly you have an actual portfolio to show. This is the same thing with your LinkedIn. Update your LinkedIn, update your social media, make sure that's like reasonably professional at least. And just so that if something happens, on the day it happens, you can send out applications. You can just contact people and just apply for it. Otherwise, you need to spend months doing that anyway. And it's rough. It's rough to do that. And I've done that in the past. I didn't have a professional. I still don't have a professional showreel. I never made a professional showreel, but because it was always under NDA. But I kept doing some personal work when I was doing VFX. So at least I had something to show. Because otherwise, I've seen this a lot where you have senior artists who their only personal work is literally student work, like a really crappy student work from maybe like 10 years ago, because they just got into the field and they improved a crazy amount, but they haven't actually done personal work and they have nothing to show for it because of cancelled or project or NDA. Update your LinkedIn, update your portfolio, make new, current, up-to-date pieces, and then apply for all the things. Just be ruthless about it. Not ruthless, be effective, right? Just keep applying for all the jobs you can, and then look for alternative industries, like we talked about before. The economy is not just like the tide lifts all boats, right? Well, it lifts all boats in one area. Like if you're in a river, right, it's not going to lift that one. So there are companies that are more insular compared to this, like. Some of these we were asking on Twitter for ideas. Some of these will be ArchViz, where you're doing architectural visualization. You have medical visualization. You have motion design, VR and AR. In this case, you can. This is often done by big tech companies. Like I'm not sure how they're currently doing, but I know that both like Google and Apple, Google, Meta, and Apple have all been working on like tech for this kind of stuff. Snapchat as well, and 3D printing, jewelry design. A lot of people actually responded with military, where there's a lot of visualization within the military industry. Obviously, we're not military dudes, but there's a...
We see that actually for FlippedNormals. We have the U.S. military as a client. Or client, but like they're a customer. We see purchases from whatever military.gov or something sometimes. So they are doing that, which is interesting.
It's wild. And they're just 3D artists, right? Like a lot of people were just saying that, they did military contracts for like a few years. They even had their not sure if it's like top clearance or top secret clearance, but they had like military clearance in order to work on stuff, right? So there's tons of stuff there. And you have programming as well, like in the tech industry. This is something that I wouldn't be able to just reskill to become a programmer, but if you are a rigger or you've been, which you might be using a lot of tech or like a lot of code, a lot of Python and such. If you're doing something where you're already doing a lot of programming, it might not take you that long to like upskill because you already know the foundations of it. Like we worked with people before who's been artists, who's also been like legit programmers, who's made their own software. So in that case, you might be able to just like formalize some of the stuff you've kind of been working on yourself, take some courses here and there, and then you can join a different industry. Like I'm not saying leaving the industry. Like this is like temporary stuff. Like if you love games or you love movies, but there aren't openings there's no shame whatsoever to go into ArchViz. It is what it is. If there aren't positions, and you need to feed your family, right?
And I think, the big ones here. So I started off doing ArchViz, actually. I found like a local advertising company and just asked them when I was 15 or something, hey, can I do stuff for you? And that sort of developed into ArchViz. ArchViz and medical visualizations, those are two massive fields. Like they are huge. I'm not saying it might be easier to get work there, but there is definitely work outside of like your normal comfort zone. And I think the same thing with VR and especially AR now. If you look at the Quest 3, I think it is, that came out, like whatever like the stuff that they're doing there, those types of companies will also be looking to hire. Obviously, goes up and down like everything else in the economy, but expanding your horizons could be the difference, could make the difference between staying in a 3D relevant job versus having to do something completely different where you don't necessarily get to keep your skills as much up to date.
It's miles better to do something in medical visualization, or like not even saying these are bad fields, they're great fields, they just might not be your thing, but it's much better to do something like jewelry design and medical visualization than it is to work at a warehouse, just in purely like purely a case of you keeping your skills fresh. That means you get to work on it every single day, and you get to at least have some connection to the community. But if you're working in something that's just entirely like a whole different sector, there's nothing wrong with that. You got to take what you can take. I don't know people who's looking for those kind of jobs at the moment. But if there is a way to continue to work with your craft, to keep refining that, I mean, in some ways, you might even learn different ways of doing that. If you're like a lighter in film and you get to work with archivists, you're going to see a whole different ways of lighting things, right?
Yeah.
Another thing you can do as well. This is more of we're a little bit careful about how we're phrasing this one, but you can create tutorials and you can sell those tutorials. We run FlippedNormals.com. There are tons of marketplaces out there as well, other sites you can sell stuff on. But if you're a professional, then you have a marketable skill set. Then you have a skill set that other people would be interested in. So let's say, right, that you're a prop artist working in a company. You could create tutorials on how to create props, find what you're really good at, figure out what students are actually struggling with, and then you can create props for that. We have tutorials on our YouTube channel as well, and we have articles on our blog as well on how to create tutorials. So we go fairly in depth into this, like what tools you need, how you structure this kind of stuff. Because I think that's a pretty
that's all free, by the way. You don't have to pay for that. It's all free.
So because then you have a skill set, and you can actually make a decent living out of making these kind of tutorials, making these kind of assets. It's at least in the beginning is not going to be your main income, but if you can make like a few thousand or a few hundred to a few $1,000s a month on that, that's a huge help. Also because it's passive, right? In that regard, obviously there's no such thing as a passive income because you have to put a lot of work into it. We know that because we make tutorials, right? But at least once they're out there, then you can actually make like a fairly decent supplementary income, at least. You can scale it up as well. There are people who do this full time, including us, that we're doing, right? But I do really recommend looking at your skill set and then seeing what you how you can use that to create some kind of assets or something like that.
What I've seen a lot in the past, and it's not that this is an ad for FlippedNormals, but like we just happen to run a marketplace, so that's why we really wanted to talk about this angle as well. There are plenty of other ones out there, so feel free to use whatever. But we've seen this a lot with people where they have a really marketable skill set when it comes to teaching. They've never done teaching, and they think that the skill that they have, is so intuitive to them that they don't think about that other people don't have that skill within 3D. Like maybe like what Henning was talking about, you're making props for games. That's your day job. You do it all the time. So you really don't put any effort into thinking about that as a skill anymore. But a bunch of people don't know how to make props for games. Maybe they want to learn it. And that's why I think there's so much room for more creators within our industry, games, VFX, commercials, whatever it may be, just because everyone has unique perspectives and they teach in very different ways. So even though some people might like our tutorials, they're definitely not for everyone. Not everyone is going to like our style of teaching, but maybe if you start making something, you make character tutorials, someone is really going to click with your way of teaching and the kinds of subjects that you choose. Therefore, you can still be successful in a market that otherwise actually has a lot of educators already.
Yeah, this is kind of how Airbnb got started, like the last recession, last big one, 2008. Tons of people had empty bedrooms and like empty spare rooms and such. And then multi-billion-dollar like Airbnb comes around, multi-billion-dollar company like Airbnb comes around, and they can suddenly capitalize on that. The people who had empty rooms were able to fill those rooms, and Airbnb as a company made made a lot of money on that, and that can really help people. Like if you're actually interested in creating content like that, you can send me an email directly. Like I can actually give you a hand on this. You can just send it to henning@flippednormals.com. Might be busy, but like at least the offer is there to help you like see how you can actually create a course on that. I've been helping a fair few people throughout. It might just be some little tips before we start making a whole course, just like a little recording test, just to know that you're doing all right. But yeah, that's you absolutely do not have to make tutorials and put them on FlippedNormals.com. That's it's one way to do it. It's one way to make additional income. But the most important thing for sure is to make sure your portfolio is up to date. Make sure your resume, your LinkedIn, all that kind of stuff is really up to date. And the market is going to most likely, not going to do predictions, most likely it's going to recover at some point, right? There are two options. Either it recovers or it never does. Right?
Or the world just explodes.
Yeah, the world explodes. Hopefully that is not the case in our situation.
No,
so, I mean, it's always recovered before. So let's really hope it does now as well. And
I don't know if you're tired of listening to Henning and I speak, but we've been talking for a long time. I'm pretty sure we've gone through everything we really wanted to talk about. Unless, do you have something at the very end here, Henning, where you're like, this is something people need to know?
Strikes are over. The writer strikes, actor strikes are officially over now.
True. Very important to keep in mind. That
means that hopefully, at least in VFX, that starts to pick up. Again, all the things we're talking about now about the general macroeconomic trends, this is true for the economy, but for film and VFX, this was one external event, I guess 2 external events that like completely stopped filming. So with that said, like that should recover. It's probably going to be, I don't know, hopefully 6 months until you're seeing this really come back. But yes, I mean, stay resilient about this. We also have a FlippedNormals Discord as well. If you're interested in having more of a community to talk about this, we're hopefully going to do. Like, it's not fun to do an episode like this one where we're talking like it's a pretty depressing topic, right?
Yeah.
But we had to do a lot of research. We had to be really careful how to phrase things here, and it just the market right now just sucks. It's really painful for so many people. So hopefully in the future we do more practical episodes or like discuss like how to improve your art and these kind of things. But I think it's important.
That will come.
But I think it's important that now we have a bit of a unique perspective, I think, on this, just because we've been doing like our company now full time for 5 years, 10 years since we started FlippedNormals, right? So we learned so much about economy, running a business and all that in that time. So hopefully we were able to give you some insights into that.
Yeah, man. Whew, long one. But I think that's about it. So thank you so much for watching, if you're watching on YouTube or listening. And we will be back hopefully next week with another exciting topic, because I don't think we won't have time for more this week, that's for sure. But
yeah.
All right.
See you guys soon.
See ya.